Financial problems rarely arrive all at once. It's quieter than that. A takeout order when you're too drained to cook, something in your cart after a rough day. The familiar thought, I'll get serious about money later, repeated just often enough to become a lifestyle. A few years pass, nothing's changed, and it's hard to even pinpoint why. There's one number that cuts through all of that noise. Almost nobody tracks it. Most people who build real wealth almost instinctively do. Take what you actually keep after everything and reduce it to a single day. Not a year, not a month, a day. Because annual goals live in the future. Daily behavior lives in your nervous system. That's the quiet difference between someone who builds financial freedom without any single dramatic move and someone who earns well for a decade and still feels like they're treading water. It's rarely about intelligence or income, honestly. It's about what you do on a Tuesday afternoon when no one's watching, including yourself. There's a reason this hits differently than a yearly goal. Big targets barely move the needle on behavior. They feel distant, abstract enough that your brain quietly files them under later. Save more this year. Invest more. Spend less. It all sounds right. None of it creates urgency. Daily numbers do something different. When the frame is small enough, things become real. One impulse purchase doesn't disappear into the noise of a monthly budget. It has weight. An unnecessary subscription isn't invisible anymore. The future stops feeling theoretical. That's not motivation. That's just awareness. And most of the time, awareness changes behavior on its own. The avoidance piece is worth sitting with for a second. Most people who stay stuck financially aren't careless. They're protecting themselves, not checking the balance, not opening that credit card statement, not thinking too hard about where it all goes. It works briefly. The discomfort fades, but the pattern stays. And quietly, repeated behavior becomes financial reality. This is why a raise often doesn't fix anything. The income changes, the patterns don't. More money tends to amplify whatever's already there. Someone spending emotionally at one income level usually keeps spending emotionally at a higher one, just with bigger numbers and a cleaner justification. The raise gets absorbed. Lifestyle expands to meet it. A few years later, the math looks almost identical. That's the trap of believing the problem is income. Motivation has the same issue. It's real, but it's fragile. One brutal week, one season of burnout, and whatever willpower you'd been relying on quietly evaporates. That's not weakness. That's just how it works. Systems survive things motivation doesn't. An automatic transfer doesn't care if you're exhausted. A separate account doesn't negotiate with your mood. Small amounts moved before you have a chance to spend them don't require a decision at all, which is exactly the point. That's where things actually start to shift. Not dramatically, not visibly, even. What makes this difficult to notice is that they feel almost meaningless while they're happening. A minor transfer, a slightly smaller purchase, one less reactive decision. None of it feels like progress. Repeated for years, it becomes a completely different financial life. That's how most of it actually works, not through a single turning point, but through ordinary behavior that keeps happening even when you don't feel like it. Most spending isn't really about needing something. It's about feeling something. Stress, boredom, that specific exhaustion that makes a small reward feel completely reasonable. Something shifts internally. and within seconds there's a purchase for something you weren't even thinking about an hour earlier. Modern life is almost perfectly designed to let this happen. No friction, no pause, no natural moment to reconsider. A bad mood can become a transaction before the feeling even peaks. This is why people who genuinely turn their finances around usually aren't just budgeting harder. They're changing the environment around their decisions, unsubscribing from things that constantly create desire, making impulse purchases slightly more inconvenient. None of this feels significant while it's happening. $20 not spent impulsively, a small transfer going out automatically, one less purchase made from stress. In the moment, it registers as almost nothing. But the math doesn't stay small. $600 a month no longer disappearing quietly becomes over $7,000 a year. Sustained for a decade, the gap between someone with systems and someone without them becomes genuinely hard to explain by income alone, even when the incomes were nearly identical the whole time. That's what people consistently get wrong about wealth. It tends to follow behavior before it follows income. Someone earning an ordinary salary with real structure often ends up in a stronger position than someone making significantly more with none. The other shift is harder to quantify, but it might matter more. At some point, the behavior stops feeling forced. Saving loses the feeling of sacrifice. Impulse spending loses its pull. Financial collapse rarely arrives all at once. Neither does wealth. Both tend to build quietly through repeated behavior that stops feeling significant precisely because you've seen it so many times. A transfer, a moment where emotion didn't get to make the call, a purchase that didn't happen, small, forgettable, until the trajectory has already changed. Here's what most people miss. They think they're adjusting numbers. Usually, they're adjusting identity, and identity, once it shifts, runs on its own. The person who built systems that hold, even on difficult days, lives in a fundamentally different relationship with money than someone still reacting to every emotional signal. That difference doesn't announce itself. It just compounds, quietly, consistently, until the two paths no longer look like variations of the same life at all. One future gets heavier, the other gets lighter. That's what's actually at stake in small daily decisions. Not just the math, the direction. And direction, repeated long enough, becomes the life itself. If this gave you a different way to think about money and behavior, subscribe. There's more worth getting into.